Now let's have a go at deriving the quadratic formula for ourselves by simply completing the square using a, b and c instead of having actual numbers in there so that we can come up with our own formula. All right, what did we do first when we had a number other than 1 out the front? We divided through by that number, didn't we? So if we divide all 4 terms here by a, we'll end up with just x squared here. Here we'll have bx over a. Let's just write it as b over a so we can still clearly see the coefficient, and that's how many x's we've got. And then we'll have c over a, and of course 0 over a is still just 0. And if we want to, we can actually subtract c over a at this point. Why would we do that? Well, it's a way of sort of getting that constant out of the way so that we can add the constant that we want. So I could write that all on the next line. I'm going to cheat a little bit here to save a little bit of board space and just say that that equals negative c on a. Everyone happy with that? Okay, what do we do next? Well, normally we leave a line and then we think about what we want our completed square to look like. We want something in this sort of shape, don't we? And now that we've got a 1 out the front there, we can tell that our firsts are x. How do we normally find this number? We halve that one, don't we? All right, now if we're halving b over a, don't be afraid to do your working over on the side just to think it through. Halving it is dividing by 2, and that's the same thing as multiplying by a half. So we're going to get b over 2a, and that makes sense, doesn't it? Because if you've got a fraction and you've just halved it, normally the denominator gets twice as big. Think of it, half of a half is a quarter. So we're going to get half of b over a, and that's b over 2a. What do we do next? Well, next we normally expand this back out on the line that we left, because that way we can halve our term and then we can square it. So the first 2 terms are really easy. You just write out the 2 terms from above. And then the last term is going to be this one squared. Now when we square a fraction, we can just square the top and square the bottom. Don't forget we've got 2a times 2a, so we're going to get 4a squared there, not 2a squared. All right, now let's compare these 2 lines. We've gone and added this extra term here on the left-hand side, so we're going to have to add it to the right as well, just to keep them balanced. Since it's a positive term, I'm going to write it first. So I've got that, and then minus my c over a. All right, now comparing these 2 lines, these 3 terms are taken care of here. And on this side, I could just tidy this part up. Now, I've got fractions that I'm subtracting here. I can't subtract them unless they've got common denominators. So I can make common denominators of 4a squared. I just need to multiply this one by 4a, don't I? I can actually do it right here. Multiply multiply the denominator by 4a, and multiply the numerator also by 4a. That's going to give me 4ac. I've sort of been a bit cheeky there and just done 2 things in one go. It saves me writing everything out again. I don't need that there, that was just my thinking. All right, so now these 3 terms are represented here. These ones we can just tidy up. We've got the same denominator now, so we've got 4a squared, and we've got b squared minus 4ac, which should be starting to sound familiar to you. All right, next step. What do we do when we're solving these? Take the square root of both sides. So taking the square root here, we'll get x plus b over 2a. And taking the square root here, don't forget that when you're taking the square root of a fraction, you can write it like that, or you can write it as the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom. I'm going to choose to do it this way. Why do you reckon that's going to be? Well, I can see that what's on the denominator here is a perfect square. Square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of a squared is 2a. So when I take the square root of this side, I need to remember the plus and minus, and I can put my b squared minus 4ac up top, and on the bottom, I could write square root of 4a squared, but I can actually see that in my head. That's going to actually be 2a. And that's handy because it's going to talk to these 2a's over here in a moment, because our next step is to subtract this term from both sides. So now we have it, x is equal to, let's subtract b over 2a from both sides. And now we've got plus and minus all of this. And now you'll notice something. We've got common denominators here. So this can be written as one big fraction all over 2a, and we've just generated our quadratic formula. So you can see that all we really did to generate the formula, we just completed the square. But completing the square is slow, and there's lots of steps that you might mess up, whereas throwing numbers into this quadratic formula. It's a way of just skipping to the end, a recipe, if you like, to complete the square quickly.